Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Politics. I'm Kevin Klein. I am joined by two of my Winnipeg Sun colleagues. We have Royce Coupe, who is also a professor of political science at the University of Manitoba, and Lawrence Pinsky, KC, who is a former human rights adjudicator. Gentlemen, busy week in Canadian politics, so let's kick it off with what's happening inside the Liberal Party. I sense that could be a reality show that Royce wants to put together. Would that be right? You want to make that a reality show, right, Royce?
That's a great idea. We could get them onto some tropical island and have them kick each other, have them kick themselves off the island. It was another big dramatic week in the Liberal Party. Last time we talked, it was after Minister Stephen Guilbeault had resigned from the cabinet in protest against the MOU that was signed with Alberta. The resignation of a minister is a very big deal on principle. And then in the last week, we discovered that Mr. Guilbeault is not going to go quietly into the night. He was giving interviews, including some very kind of long interviews in which he expanded on his critiques of the government. In his view, of course, Mr. Guilbeault is a pretty strident environmentalist. He made it clear he didn't think it's going to be possible for the Liberal government to meet its emissions targets given this MOU. And I think even on a more kind of personal basis, he revealed that he was one of the Liberals who was dispatched by Carney to go and convince Elizabeth May to vote for the budget. And some of the arguments that he made to May to convince her to do so, the Liberal Party the government just broke its promises. Just like a week later, just completely turned its back, which led to her saying she won't vote for the government anymore. And Guilbeault has kind of confirmed that he felt implicated in that, like he had misled her, and he was concerned about that. So there could be more people coming. There's now British Columbia Liberal MPs contradicting the government. We're getting different narratives, different views. There is not a coherent message coming out about this MOU, and I think we could actually see more resignations in the days to come.
Love that idea. Love that idea, Royce. If we see more resignations in the days to come, although latest polls seem to show that people are parked where they are. There isn't a movement toward or away from one party or another. I think the NDP are up a point, the Bloc Québécois is up a point, but overall, the Liberals remain ahead. If there was ever a loser in all of this, it's got to be Elizabeth May. She either is the most naive, stupidest politician on the Hill, that she accepted Mr. Carney saying that he'll meet the Paris targets, and that was good enough to vote for the budget. Or she's just a politician like any other politician who says what she needs to say to get by. I kind of think it's the latter. But it just reveals how disingenuous she really is, although she now says she won't vote again with the government. It's really an interesting thing. It's hard to know what to make of Mr. Guilbeault. On the one hand, is he the moral actor who stands by his word? But on the other hand, there's a disconnect because the MOU doesn't actually lead to a pipeline. It actually doesn't do anything. It's a Schrodinger's MOU, as I said once before. It's both the pipeline is both dead and alive at the same time, and we won't know the results until we open the box. So that's what we have here. So it's hard to know if the Liberals are playing at two sides of the same coin, sort of saying, yeah, it's going to result in pipelines on the one hand. On the other, it really isn't going to. So they kind of can have the best of both worlds at the same time if they're really Machiavellian. And if there's anything the Liberal Party is, it's immoral and Machiavellian. So it's really interesting to watch.
Well, it's interesting watching Jolie now when Salantas came out and basically threw the government under the bus after, Jolie and others made all these comments about Salantas, and they just kind of came out and said, yeah, no, none of that is true. Not shocked by that, right? Politicians try to spin everything to the positive before doing their due diligence on something, or somebody on their staff may have said, oh, they were told they had to do this. And and so on. But that's why now we're hearing Jolie's name being bounced around as the ambassador to France. I think that's part of that interpolitical bantering that Royce is talking about. I think that there's those that this, I was talking to somebody today, and it's interesting because we both felt that it was the former finance minister, and her name escapes me right now. And I don't know why. Who am I
Christy
thinking of?
Freeland.
Thank you,
Christy
Christopher
Freeland.
Freeland. Actually worked with Carney to bring Trudeau down, and that's how she got her appointment in England, in Britain, because obviously somebody high up in the party, maybe the prime minister, has some contacts and used those to get her the position that she got, and also gave her a position. So I'm wondering if there's more internal, right, talking going on now to maybe bring down the party. Maybe that's why everyone's talking about a spring election. Maybe we're going to see more people jumping ship, or at least not wanting to vote on side with the government, like you're saying, Royce. It's starting to be a reality show that people should be paying attention to.
Yeah, one of the theories related to Melanie Joly is that a lot of the files she's dealing with, they're turning into a disaster. The federal government has given tens, hundreds of millions of dollars to multinational corporations explicitly to keep jobs in Canada, and they're all just ignoring them. They're moving operations to the U.S., investing in U.S. Operations, as you would fully expect in a situation in which there's 30% tariffs. It's not hard to figure out what companies that are capable of moving their operations are going to do. So the Liberal government has spent huge amounts of money trying to prevent this, and it's been a failure. In the case of Algoma Steel, we saw, I think it was a thousand
Yeah.
workers in Sault Ste. Marie are now out of work. Sault Ste. Marie is not a very big place. We now know that the government knew this was coming. There was no, they gave a huge amount of money to this corporation, knowing that this was going to come anyway. What are we paying for? And so the idea with Jolie is this is turning into such a disaster that she can basically kind of wear all of this, and then they just say, okay, now go move to Belgium or wherever, be the ambassador. That actually makes some sense to me.
Hmm.
So it's interesting, isn't Melanie Joly one of the ministers who said when they gave billions of dollars to Stellantis that she didn't read the contract? And wasn't that also another minister who said that she didn't read the contract? And Melanie Joly stood in the House and said, "We're suing Stellantis," and Stellantis said, "No suit as far as we know." So it's just she was a disaster as foreign affairs minister. She's a disaster in this portfolio. She was so revealing uh, as to her being a crass sort of political hack when she talked to Tom O'Kerr about Canadian foreign policy and revealed it's because of the demographics of her constituency that she was shifting Canadian foreign policy. So there's I'd be happy to see her go to France or really anywhere. I'm not sure, Kevin, that I agree with your analysis about what's going on inside the Liberal Party. I say that because the polls don't support that Canadians understand what's happening. It may be that Liberal insiders understand what's about to happen to the Canadian economy with Mr. Trump and the CUSMA deal coming up for renewal, potentially with Mr. Trump saying he may not want to renew it, and what that will mean for the Canadian economy. So maybe they're, as rats do on a sinking ship, maybe that's it. But the polls don't reflect that at this point in time.
But let's talk about past experience, right? Didn't this happen when Paul Martin took over the Liberal Party? There was a bit of a coup that happened within the party, and they went through some problems. I mean, we've seen that. We're seeing that now in BC, right? We've seen the leader having to step down in BC for the Conservative Party there, because it was going to bring a civil war. And who knows what's happening within the Liberal Party? And this is Royce's topic. This is something that he's been following and has written about in the Winnipeg Sun, and you can see it at winnipegsun.com. And it generates a lot of comments. A lot of people are paying attention to that. But you're right. That doesn't reflect the polls right now. It doesn't reflect the performance of Mr. Carney, if you will. He still has very high rating numbers. So where does this lead though? If you're Mr. Carney, what happens now? You've got this internal fighting. You know it's started and you know it's percolating. What do you do to fix it and still be able to do what you've promised to do for Canada? That's my question. That would be very difficult. You're the leader of a corporation and none of the managers want to work for you.
Well,
Yeah.
is that it, or is it that he wants to clean those that baggage out of his caucus or out of his cabinet, which would also make sense because Mr. Guilbeault may not be aligned with what Mr. Carney wants to do. On the other hand, he may be, and this may all be a ruse. It's very difficult to tell at this point, at least for me. Royce, what do you think?
Well, I think the counter argument to that is that he just brought in a new minister, and it is Mark Miller, the quintessential Trudeau dinosaur. And so I think this is just a kind of question of caucus management. You know, the great politicians in Canada being great managers of their caucus. We thought that Stephen Harper was a dictator when he was prime minister. Actually, you know, MPs say no. Actually, he listened to people in caucus meetings. He was attentive. He was a good manager of people in the caucus, and it's becoming very clear Carney is still a pretty green politician, and he's just not doing that. You know, on the pipeline, we found out this week the idea of a new pipeline is very popular among Canadians, and so it makes sense that this is something that Carney would pursue. It's just one problem. It's not popular in his own party. It's not popular in his own caucus, and so now he's encountering all these problems. It's leading to some of this incoherence in the government's messaging, despite the fact that it's very popular. He didn't take into account his own party when he ran towards that outcome. It's
But
going to be a
Royce,
real problem for him.
you're thinking that there's a pipeline. There is no pipeline. The indigenous groups don't want some of them anyway, the loud ones don't want a pipeline. Mr. Eby in BC says there's no pipeline. Mr. Carney says there's no pipeline unless they agree. There's
Yeah.
both a pipeline and there's no pipeline.
It's a great point. So in the MOU, that it obligates the government and the government of Alberta to consult with First Nations that are affected and with British Columbia. And yet we have Liberal MPs from BC this last week saying that they would have to agree. There's a difference between agreeing and consultation, between a veto and consultation. So we've got Liberal ministers actively contradicting each other. I think Lawrence made a great point. That might be an intentional strategy to kind of muddy the waters on this. But hey, newsflash, guys, it's not the 1930s. You know, Mackenzie King isn't the prime minister. It's harder to get away with this stuff nowadays. There's video. We can actually compare what politicians are saying to each other. So I don't think if that's the strategy, best of luck. I don't even think the Liberal Party of Canada can pull this off.
But if you're Prime Minister Carney, you've come from the private sector, you've held executive positions within the private sector. I mean, you should know how to manage your staff. You should know how to manage your managers. I mean, that's most important, right? We've talked about that in past with different governments. That is vitally important, and that's why a lot of people voted for him because they thought he'll bring that experience to government. Now, if I'm Mr. Carney, I've got to be shaking my head, though, that I've got a bunch of caucus members that don't want a pipeline and watching, what's going to be happening to our economy. Sure, we had good job numbers today, 54,000 new jobs, wasn't anticipated. That's great, but we haven't seen the full effects yet of all the job losses, right? And you talked about Algoma Steel and others that have lost their jobs. So, we're going to start seeing some real numbers, I think, next year of what's happening within the Canadian economy. And I don't think it's going to be all that pretty. So if you have, again, I want to go back to it. You have all this going on. What does Carney do? Because, Lawrence, you said, well, he maybe is wanting to replace the old Trudeau baggage. Okay, but you're going to have to get somebody to run in their seat because they're still going to be in caucus and they're still going to be throwing darts every time you turn around to write on the board.
So you guys have touched on a couple interesting things in what you're talking about. One is the job stats. So I dug a little bit into them, and it's youth employment that surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, is mostly floating our numbers up a little bit because it seems to dovetail with some limitations on temporary foreign workers. What do you know? Mr. Poiliev might have been right.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Mhm.
Um, So that's a one thing. Royce, you I hate to put it this way, you touched on Mr. Miller, on the return of Mark Miller. Um, this is the guy, this is shocking to me, who recently said that the Bible, teaching the Bible, talking about the Bible, might be a hate crime under Bill C-9 as it is being amended. That's a whole other topic. It's a disaster, but it's very complicated, and one day we should talk about that, and one day soon, because it there seems to be a deal between the Bloc and the Liberals. Anyway, so there's very interesting contradictory things that are going on. Again, when I talked about the biggest loser is Ms. May, the biggest winner, I think, could be the Conservative Party, because again, if they are resurgent and if 5 seats go to the NDP, and if the NDP vote resurfaces in other constituencies across the country, the Conservatives, if they maintain their present popularity, they will form government.
Yeah, sometimes there's a price to be paid for being principled in politics, but sometimes there's a real benefit. The conservatives have been clear, they've been consistent, and they're united in favor of a pipeline. And public opinion is on their side. It's like the carbon tax. This is a war that they've basically won in the realm of public opinion. And if the liberals are going to be divided, if they're going to be confused on this issue, then yeah, this is something that could very clearly benefit the conservatives. You know, you asked what is Mark Carney going to do about problems in his caucus. I think he's shown us what he wants to do. He wants an election. He knows what's coming. He knows that those job numbers are going to get worse. Those economic numbers are going to get way worse, as they have to with 30% tariffs on some of our most important exports. Things are going to get worse. He's made it very clear he wants to lock in a majority government now. He doesn't want to be stuck in a vulnerable minority situation when the numbers really start to tank. He couldn't get that through poaching conservative MPs. The party kind of battened down the hatches in response to that one MP leaving. And so, yeah, I'm kind of coming around to your view, Kevin. I think we could get a spring election, one very soon, as Carney is going to get more and more desperate to try to get a majority government.
Well, I think he has to. That's what I believe. I think that's what he wants. He wants that power because he does have more power to do some stuff when he has a majority government. He doesn't have to play those games in Parliament, which we know he's not experienced at, which I like. I don't like, career politicians, to be quite honest. But, he has to learn how to negotiate and such. So he's probably sitting there thinking, it's probably best for me to call an early election and see if I can't get a majority. But the warning would then have to be to the conservatives, because I think this you don't start making up slogans again, because when the opposition, the team you're playing against, is making mistakes, let them sit back and let them. Just let them make those mistakes, and then you will benefit from those mistakes. But you don't want to get back into that same kind of political mode we were last election. Just let them make these mistakes, because I think more and more people, you're right. More people are in favor of the pipeline, and as they learn more about it, and you're going to have to go to non-mainstream media to find more about it. I mean, the pipeline is really just an MOU, and people sign MOUs all the time, and they're meaningless. They're for show. They're part of the political theater. And this MOU, of course, means you have to have the private sector build it. Who's going to do that and make all those agreements with all the different parties that they have to?
I agree with you, Kevin, and we saw it actually when Mr. Trudeau, the first one, came back into government. We talked about this once before, that he was so unpopular, but he won a majority by being kept quiet.
Mhm.
And Royce, you mentioned Mackenzie King. Well, he was an interesting guy. Never mind his psychotic behavior with, channeling his dead mother and dog, but he was very flexible as a labor lawyer and negotiators how to deal with things. He didn't really have a background. He'd go from side to side. His opponent, Arthur Mahan from Manitoba, um, he was principled, rigid, and right, but he lost. And I hope that the Conservative Party is taking a lesson, is reminding itself of the history, and understanding how to win the next time. They have a good guy in place, it seems, who's going to run the campaign, and Mr. Outhouse. And I hope they learn the lesson because Mr. Poilievre has to run as the guy who will keep Canada together, as the unifier, not keep Canada strong, but keep it together. Separatism is growing in Alberta and elsewhere, which we'll talk about later or another time. And yeah, these are precarious times. I agree with you, Royce and Kevin. Get ready for a spring or early summer election.
Yeah, and I think if you're Mr. Poilievre and part of the Conservative Party and the other team is scoring on their net, keep giving them the puck. Just
Yeah.
keep passing the puck directly to them and let them keep scoring on their own net. It's just the way to play the game.
Yeah. A long time ago, someone told me, I wasn't totally sure I agreed with it, but he made the argument that the worst politicians are former military people. Not because he had anything against the military, but because when you're in the military, you issue a command and people follow the command. And so you come into politics and you start doing that. And oh, it turns out that's not how politics works. You have to convince people, you have to bring them on side, you have to use a bunch of kind of subtle tools to get your way. And I think there's something to be said for that. You bring in someone from the business world like Mr. Carney. He is probably someone that's very used to getting his way, to issuing commands, and people follow his commands. And I think we're seeing a lot of evidence that that's not how politics works, and he is not getting the outcomes that he wants as a result of this. It's taking him a long time to learn how to actually play the game. And he's the prime minister. He started off at the very top. He had no apprenticeship at all.
Yeah, yeah.
I,
Well, you know
I,
what?
I, I should say this, sorry, one thing. In terms of Mr. Poilievre's flexibility, you guys probably saw this I think it was last week, the correspondence dinner in Ottawa. Mr. Poilievre was hilarious. He was very funny, very human, very self-deprecating. The NDP leader, the interim leader,
Yeah,
was
it's
also very
fantastic.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hilarious to watch that. So I urge everyone to watch it if you haven't seen it. It's very, very funny. Although we're going to see some own goals coming up after the meeting in Washington, which I hope we talk about soon, Kevin.
Yeah, that will cut it off here. This is a good discussion. On our next episode, we've got a couple episodes coming up where we want to talk about trade and Mr. Carney being down to see Mr. Trump again. And we also want to talk about a motion that was made or a legislation that was put forward in Manitoba that Royce is talking about. He's got a column about it at winnipegsun.com. And also, I want to filter back in with Mark Miller because you're right. Some of the things that he's saying is not making a lot of sense. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Next couple of episodes are going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you follow our channel. Please smash that like button, and we'll talk to you on the next edition of Inside Politics.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegsun.com for more.